which can only be guaranteed once prototyping and analysis of these new requirements has been performed. Was that stage ever reached?
Sorry, which particular stage was reached?
You say here in the note, we will endeavour to meet the IMS specifications, which can only be guaranteed once prototyping and analysis of these new requirements has been performed. And I'm just asking you whether that stage was ever reached.
Absolutely. It's been reached with the baseline architecture, the baseline technologies. I've talked about the language that the computers were speaking with XTP. That we certainly, in terms of all those milestone tests, we actually far exceeded those. What this particular note means, and it says specifically with the TCP/IP routing, that I do need to elaborate just slightly, it'll only take a minute. When we were looking at that architecture diagram before, the CS7 Mod 1, and there was the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Your monochrome versions had the dark and the grey. We would have completely, and well, we did completely meet and already proven that we met all of those specifications that were relevant to what we call the real-time side, the hard real-time side, which in my diagram in colour here is the light blue side. To the right-hand side of that little box said BIFU, and that side talked XTP. On the other side, where it talked TCP/IP, because of the very nature of TCP/IP, it is slower. It would have had a possible performance degradation possible, and that is why we downgraded the performance. But I can assure you that even if there had been a downgraded performance, it wouldn't have affected the non-real-time side, which is the left-hand side of the combat management system side.
So you were then in a position to issue the guarantee?
We would have been in a position if we'd been asked to do so, I would imagine, yes.
If that can close off the picture that I've been asking you to elaborate in regard to C squared, I squared, in its quotations and in its interaction with Thompson's and with the SA Navy, I now want to turn to the position of the SA Navy. And again, I don't want to waste time. If you don't have knowledge of this, you must say so. The approach that was made to the Navy was that the cost could be reduced, and particularly the cost of the combat suite could be reduced, if the Navy were prepared to take a part of the risk attaching thereto to itself. Have you any personal knowledge of this?
Yes, well, I've referred in the letters that we've just ventilated to some degree, the Part B and the Part C, so I had a small knowledge at that time of what that meant.
And you understand that the proposition was that the Navy would take a certain amount of risk up to the factory acceptance tests?
That's correct, yes.
Another question for the Navy was whether it was prepared to have a reduction of the purchase price based on its assumption of risk, and if so, what parts of the equipment it was prepared to offer to undertake the risk until factory acceptance. Do you understand that that was the debate and the dilemma?
Yes, it involved the South African developed subsystems.
Previous to this negotiating problem arising, do you understand there had never been a B and a C category risk?
Yes, I understand that.
the whole notion of a Category C arose when Thompson's or ADS made the proposal that the Navy should undertake some of the risk of some of the suppliers.
Yes, I think that's correct.
And in the result, some of the suppliers were in fact assumed by the Navy as its risk up to the stage of factory acceptance. But the C²I² system was not categorized in that way. The Navy refused to undertake that risk. Do you know that?
Yes, I think what you've said is not 100% correct, because we addressed the one letter probably around the 26th of May, where Pierre Monod was explaining the price changing, and one of the explanations was the moving of the IMS from Part C to Part B. So on their own version, the IMS had originally been categorized as Part C.
Whose version?
ADS's.
I'm dealing with an aspect of the South African Navy who, in their internal discussions, had devised this Category C and had placed certain systems in the Category C.
I thought that you said that this was the proposal from ADS and Thompson as a mechanism for reducing the risk.
Sorry. No, you misunderstand me. The proposal from ADS and Thompson was that the SA Navy should undertake some part of the risk. Previously, the SA Navy had undertaken no part of the risk. It was all Thompson and ADS. But now the suggestion from Thompson and ADS was, if you want a reduction in the price, take some part of the risk. It was the Navy which then examined the question whether it should respond positively to such a suggestion, and if so, what risk it was prepared to undertake. And in that regard, the SA Navy undertook a classification for its own purposes into what was called Category C. Do you understand that?
Yes, what I understand, it was their response to an ADS proposal.
And whilst some systems were placed in Category C, C²I²'s IMS was never placed in Category C.
Well, that's why I'm saying, at least in the view of ADS, that is not correct, because Pierre Monod says in his letter that one of the reasons for the price increase is changing the IMS from Part C to Part B. So, unless I'm incorrect, and it's not impossible, I have been incorrect in my life before, but that's what I can remember in that letter, and that was ventilated in the first part of my evidence 2 weeks ago.
But you see, the Commission has had the evidence of the officials who were involved in this exercise, and that includes Admiral Howe, it includes Admiral Kummerman, and it includes Mr. Nokia. So I'm really not going to re-debate something about which the persons who have had knowledge have given evidence under oath and explained the position. Sorry, please will you let me finish, Dr. Young? Please.
Sorry, I thought you had finished.
Now, my comment to you is I'm not going to revisit it for your purposes. I'm just going to ask you to record that you assert that in fact the SA Navy at one stage classified the system as a C system and at another stage retracted that and classified it as a B system. That's a factual assertion which you wish to make, is it?
No, now that you've explained it, the categorization was done by the Navy in response to a proposal by ADS.
So you no longer wish to persist in asserting as a fact that the Navy put the IMS as a C and then changed it back to a B.
No, if you know better than me, and that is the actual factual situation, but that doesn't undermine what I'm saying. Is the logical inference from somebody who was only supplied with who wasn't directly involved in these negotiations, is that it was originally in Category C and was changed to Category B. So the exact mechanisms of that is beyond me. But I won't try to persist with that, other than to say, at least from ADS's perspective, it seemed to change from C to B.
And indeed, as I've mentioned before, your understanding at the time you instructed your legal team was correct. And if you turn back now to page 213, at page 213, I repeat to you what you said at paragraph 29. We understand that ADS is prepared to drop its price for the combat suite to 2.6 billion, but this would be on the basis of not accepting risk for a portion of the subsystems. In other words, ADS would drop its price if it were released from certain performance guarantees. While the Navy is apparently willing to accept this in relation to some of the subsystems, the Navy is insisting that the IMS subsystem be guaranteed. This is because the IMS subsystem is crucial to the whole operation of the vessel. It is the nerve system of the combat suite and is absolutely key. I'm putting to you that was a correct understanding of the position of the Navy.
Yes, that's correct.
So now let me try and summarize and draw all these threads together. All the three parties, four parties, Thomson's, ADS, C squared, I squared, the Navy, are facing the problem of reaching an acceptable price. One of the ways of reaching an acceptable price is for the Navy to accept some of the risk and thereby reduce the price. Another aspect of it is to clarify to what degree, if any, as between C squared, I squared, ADS and Thomson, there will be a sharing of risk or a definition of risk of the ambit of the risk as between them. What we seem to have found is that the position of the Navy was it would be prepared to assume some risk, but not in regard to the IMS. What we seem to have from C squared, I squared's position is that yes, there might be a basis upon which C squared, I squared would assume a risk to the extent of 15 to 20 million rand. And from the point of view of Thomson, there is a worry as to the consequences of it introducing into its tended product the C squared, I squared IMS system with all its attendant possible risk as viewed from their position. Is that a fair summary of where everyone stood?
No, it's not. Because is it okay? You said, is it a fair summary? Was it a fair view or position of risk? This is the position that they took on risk.
Just hold on, Dr. Yan. Just listen to the question and answer the question. Okay, if you can please repeat the question.
Thank you, Chair.
Listen to the question and answer the question.
I'm asking you if that description I have given of the standpoint of each of the parties is a fair description of the standpoint of each of the parties.
No,
In what way is it unfair?
because the position that ADS was taking on risk was unreasonable.
I'm not for the moment asking you whether it was reasonable or unreasonable. I'm asking you if I've given a fair summary of the standpoint that each was taking.
Well, again, ADS had changed, well, at the very best, being charitable, had changed their position on risk. It had been that there were no risks. Their position in December '98 was that there were no unacceptable risks. Yet suddenly now that there were these risks. So that it's not a simple yes or no answer. I would anyway, in general, I would say no. That position that ADS was taking on risk there was opportunistic and self-serving.
Now, the way that that manifested was that, as I understand it, the bid was then made to the Navy, which offered them a choice, either to take the Detexis, in which case the price would be, I forget, about 45 million rand,
49 million rand.
or to take the IMS, in which case the price would be about 85 million rand. Is that right?
77 million rand plus 12 million rand for a risk study.
And in regard to the first choice, that is of the Detexis, the Thomson ADS consortium would of course bear all the risk from its own pocket.
Yes.
But if C squared I squared's system was used, then Thomson and ADS wanted to put in the price an additional 40 million, 45 million rand to cover risk on the basis that from C squared I squared the only conceivable contribution might have been an additional 15 million rand.
Well, certainly not the only conceivable one. That is the one that I put on the table, but there were many other conceivable ones, including the various options and the combination of options. So there was certainly, that's not correct, as that's the only conceivable one.
And the proposition which I put to you before lunch, in fact you were the one who initiated it, was that if you were looking at the full extent of risk, that is, carrying a risk for anything that might be attributable to the C squared I squared IMS, then one would perhaps, on a business-like basis, raise the price to somewhere in the 80 million.
I didn't say that was reasonable, I just said that was just one arithmetic way of looking at it, just doubling our price, which would have taken it to, I used the basic price of 42 to 84, but actually our price was 30, our final price was 38. So that's just one way of looking at it. But in my view, the 89 compared to our 38 was pretty much over the top.
And once the Navy was faced with those two bids, at a time when it was driven by price, what do you think its selection was going to be? Detexis or IMS?
IMS.
Even though it would be an additional 45 million rand to the price.
I can address that by way of analogy. Why did they want a 335 million rand combat management system when they could have chosen a indigenous 95 million rand, one from ABS, possibly was spending, yeah, in fact that was the original amount. There were so many extra things that absolutely dwarfed the 2.6 billion, including its 450 million rand of system integration and project management, and its 335 million rand of combat management system, absolutely dwarfs the difference between 89 million and 38 million. And for that amount of money, they didn't need to nearly spend the 12 million rand on the INS study. So even the 77 million, for the extra 30 million rand, using the Navy's, the Department of Defence's own report, they would have got a better system.
So what it boils down to, as I understand you, is you say to the Commission, well, they should have paid twice as much for a database than they could have paid.
If they had asked us, if this whole business of risk had been addressed, formalised so much earlier, then we would have included a risk provision in our initial costings and even our initial quotations, and that could have been worked into the so-called ceiling budget. And then that wouldn't maybe have been a problem because it would have been sufficient. To deal with it, but it wasn't, and that's one of the problems I'm trying to state. The other thing I would say is, in terms of dint of logic, is if the Navy was prepared to pay 2.6 billion when its expectations was 1.9 billion, what was the fundamental difference between 2.6000 and 2.6045? Just 44 million rand. I think it's, we can calculate about 3% or some minuscule amount, when they've already accepted a jump of 700 million. Why would paying the extra to get a superior system be such an impossible hurdle?
All right, and now I want to just end off with the final effort made by the Navy to keep you within the system if that were possible. And I'm talking about a meeting which I think took place between Admiral Howell and Mr. Swan and yourself, although you don't refer to it as a meeting, you refer to it as a get-together.
Yes, it was a sit-down in comfortable chairs without a boardroom table to write or anything, so it wasn't a proper meeting.
That's because there wasn't a table in the vicinity.
No, because I went there with a person to take down notes, and one normally at a meeting sits around a table and takes notes. You don't normally have a proper meeting where you're sitting around with and just in the lounge chairs of Admiralty House. That's not what I expected.
Well, I'm not prepared to debate further through your meeting and your vocabulary, what you call a meeting and what you not call a meeting. What I want to know is this: what was discussed?
"95% of the discussions went around my threat to interdict the process because of the High Court interdict the process of awarding the contracts. We were now talking about August. In fact, my understanding at that time that the contracts were going to be signed in September. As it turned out, they were in December, but that wasn't long away. And 90 to 95% of the thing was all around my threat, and that was the first part. They were most concerned about that. The second most important part was what I would be offered as compensation for withdrawing that threat, and a minuscule part, very, very minuscule part, was regarding the risk and the issue of a performance guarantee for the combat. There's those 4 issues.
Now, in regard to the threat, that would have been a threat which, if carried through, would have disrupted the entire Corvette project for so long as the matter was tied up in the courts. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
So that was the power behind the threat, that you, with a grievance, would go to court and would cause the entire contracts for the Corvettes to be delayed indefinitely.
Well, as quick as an urgent or a semi-urgent application can be heard.
Well, wouldn't that result in an interdict?
Yes, and then there could have been, wouldn't have been indefinitely. It would hopefully would have been within a finite period of time. It certainly wasn't our intention to be a dog in the manger. We also wanted a contract. We wouldn't have been getting a contract if we postponed it indefinitely. That wasn't an intention.
Now, I perfectly understand that the threat was made by way of self-interest in order to put yourself in a bargaining position. But I'm just looking at the extent of the threat you were prepared to make the Navy sit up, as it were. And although, of course, you say it's entirely minuscule, the conversation seems to have got round to perhaps you ought to put up a performance guarantee. Is that right?
There was very, very brief discussion. In fact, one of the few points that were made is when we were actually standing up and walking out of that. If it was a meeting, by that stage the meeting was to all intents and purposes over, and Lou Swan, I think Admiral Howell, did very, very little talking at that meeting. He was a listener. Lou Swan did the talking, and I can remember quite clearly on the way out he made an observation about performance guarantee.
What was the observation?
Sorry, please just give me the time to gather my documents here. Okay, it was actually not only remembered by me, but it was recorded by Mr. Llewellyn Swan in a letter dated the 4th of October, and from what I can remember, this document was certainly discovered, and I'm just trying to work out now whether it was produced in the evidence bundles.
I'm not asking you to document it. If you can remember, just tell us.
No, I want to refer to a document. Every single correct wording, and it's important that this gets put across by me absolutely properly. If I've identified the document, I'll certainly, I'm making an offer to either identifying the discovered document or the produced document in terms of the index number or the reference number. But this was correctly recorded, as far as I, in this specific thing, by Mr. Llewellyn Roy Swan, who spells his own name incorrectly, ex-CEO of Armscor, based at the Armscor building, Pretoria. And this letter was written to Mr. Chippy Shake on the 4th of October 2000. And it's in respect of the very point you're talking about now, discussions with Mr. Richard Young held at Admiralty House in Simonstown. And he says, I would like to inform you that during 1999, together with Admiral Howell, the SA Navy had discussions with Mr. Richard Young in Cape Town concerning the management information system for the corvette program. The essence of these discussions revolved around the ability of the contractor, C212, to provide the performance guarantee necessary to satisfy Armscor that C2I2 could and would perform the tasks as required by Armscor and the DoD. What prevailed from the discussions was that C2I2 was not in a position to provide the necessary guarantees. Armscor DoD required from C212 that guarantees to the full value of the combat suite be provided, because that was the value of the effect of the MIS system that it would have on the contract. While Armscor SAM recognized the contribution of C212 to the combat suite of the corvette program in the development phase, it was not in a position to accept the risks of the C212 solution unconditionally. Now that is a very, very, very fundamental thing. And it's even more fundamental when it gets juxtapositioned with the evidence under oath given to this commission by his partner, colleague in this meeting, Admiral Howell, and that was what I was looking for. Okay. They normally, when people collaborate like this, they like to be what is called, legally speaking, on all fours. I think here they might have each been on one leg, because here it is Mr. Swan says exactly what I remember him telling me when we were standing up walking out, and it was said more as a joke, because Mr. Swan was the CEO of Armscor. He'd been the CEO of Reynolds Defence. He'd been, even though he was a chartered accountant, he says himself, I had never done a day's accounting, but he had a CA, so he understood the financial things. But he'd been involved in the defence industry. Now, what company seriously takes a request when it is submitting a 38 million rand bid, excluding VAT, to provide a performance guarantee for a 2.6 billion rand combat suite? Well, he says to the full value of the combat suite. That's why I used the value of 2.6 and not the 6.87. It couldn't have been taken seriously by me, and I didn't take it seriously at the time. But I did respond and I said that would be impossible. Our bank balance is not that extensive. And I can remember there were kind of smiles and whatever. Of course, it doesn't make sense. Okay. That was what was asked of me in the meeting. Nothing more, nothing less regarding a performance guarantee. But what I do remember, and just to show the ludicrousness, the absurdity, or the ridiculousness which seems to be the commonly used words in this commission when people are being cross-examined. Admiral Howell, and I went through this 2 nights ago, the first night after I was given this first file. And what he says was that we were asked to provide a performance guarantee for the IMS. Yet the other one says we were asked to provide a performance guarantee for the combat suite. Now, only one can be correct. And I was there. I can tell you what, we were asked to provide a performance guarantee for the value of the combat suite. It is indeed absurd and ridiculous.
I know how unfortunate it is when you make a big fuss about wanting to see a document, you then read it out and it's against you, and you have to spend 10 minutes trying to explain why it's ridiculous. But have you finished reading the actual letter?
There was nothing ridiculous about it, and it is very, very important because, at least from my perspective, it completely sums up the whole issue of risk.
Dr. Have you finished reading the letter?
Yes, I have.
Have you finished reading the letter? Because that was the question.
Yes, I have. I'd just like to make a point. My understanding is that I'm not only obliged to provide a yes or no answer like that, I am also entitled, or I have a right, to also make relevant supplementary responses to questions like that. That's my understanding.
That letter, although discovered, has it been included in the documents in your files made available to the Commission?
That was what I was attempting to do at the beginning.
I'm sorry, attempting to do what?
Well, to see if that document is referred to in my witness statement. I did have that relevant point, but I think I've in the last hour or two, I might not have that place, so it might take me a minute or two to find it in my witness statement. I can do so. If I may make an observation that's not flippant, if we're going to work till 5 or 6, I certainly would like a break in between, at 3 or 3:15 or 3:30, and if we have a break, I would certainly find it then, not to waste time.
You indicated that a proposal had been made at the meeting which you categorized as absurd, which was inquiring whether C squared I squared would put up a guarantee for the full effect and the full risk attached to the IMS as it impacted on the combat suite as a whole. You said that was ridiculous. And I think you attributed that suggestion to Admiral Howell, did you?
No, I certainly did not. I didn't read out Llewellyn Roy's name 2 or 3 times for the fun of it.
Please try and maintain an elementary degree of courtesy. Please try and avoid abuse as second nature speaking, Dr. Young.
Okay, it was said by Llewellyn Roy Swan.
Because I have before me the statement of Admiral Howell, who says at page 260 of volume 1 of the cross-examination file. You needn't turn it up, you can just listen. Thus the decision before the PCB was in effect made. The state was unwilling to assume the responsibility for the IMS and unable to carry the additional cost implication of the C squared I squared IMS. From this it followed that the state's only option was to select the Texas data bus. However, one further scenario was considered. C squared I squared would be requested to put up a performance guarantee to cover the 40 million rand risk premium attaching to its IMS. And if Young was agreeable, the PCB would be able to select C squared I squared's IMS. Was that proposal communicated to you?
Sorry, could you just refer me to that correct? No, I think that's what I was saying before. He clearly says that we were asked to provide a performance guarantee to cover the 40 million rand risk premium. Okay. It's completely different to covering, as Mr. Swan says, Arms Corps DoD required that from C212, that guarantees to the full value of the combat suite we provide. Those are two quite different things.
Well, whether they are or whether they aren't, were you prepared to put up a 40 million guarantee?
Well, we might have been, but we weren't asked to do so. You see, I think the reasonable premise is if we'd been asked directly by a new SWAT to do so, we might have at least considered doing so. But we weren't asked for it, so it becomes a complete moot point.
Well, let's leave aside moot points. At the end of the day, if I recollect correctly, you brought an array of litigation against the DoD and officials of the DoD, and that included the contention that you should be compensated because of your legitimate expectation to have received the IMS contract. Am I right?
Well, there were three defendants, and we made a claim, a total claim, and the two, you can join the first two defendants, the DoD and Arms Corps together, and that claim was in respect of legitimate expectation. And on the other side was ADS, and that claim was more in respect of unlawful competition.
And just so that there be no misunderstanding, included in the claim was a claim for compensation in respect of the IMS, and it rested on contentions of legitimate expectation, and you would serve unlawful competition as well.
That's correct, yes.
And it was settled.
It was settled, yes.
C squared, I squared received a sum of money to cover all and every piece of allegations and claims that it was making in this litigation. Is that right?
Not as far as I know. And not without referring to the settlement agreement, I certainly wouldn't agree with that.
Did C squared, I squared accept a sum of money in compensation of its claims, whether valid or invalid, relating to the IMS and the supposed legitimate expectation and the supposed unlawful competition?
Not the way you've described it, no.
Come. Did the litigation proceed?
No, but the settlement was not in respect of the claim. That was a byproduct of it. One really needs not just to work here from words or memory. The settlement agreement was, the reason for the settlement agreement was first of all initiated by the DoD. We accepted that, and the byproduct of it was that we would also settle, abandon all the litigation. But that wasn't the reason for the settlement.
And therefore, if there was ever any grievance, legitimate grievance, in the hands of C squared, I squared, in regard to the IMS, it has been settled, has it not?
Yes.
So C squared, I squared no longer has any claims in regard to the IMS contract.
Well, except in the respect of whether the terms and conditions of the settlement agreement have been breached or not.
I ask you this simply because I'm genuinely bewildered. We've spent most of the day dealing with what is obviously a difficult negotiation process about price. We know what each party did. We know the attitudes. We know the result. We know that one of the parties thereafter sued. We know that that party was settled. Why must the Commission undertake the duty of investigation of the matters appertaining to the IMS unless you have a perverse desire to seek some form of revenge about a matter long dead.
Yeah, you see, when you put it in such a tiny, tiny, minuscule nutshell, that might have some relevance. But my IMS story is part of a much greater theme, which I've addressed over something like 10 or 11 days of evidence. Goes to the terms of reference of the Commission, which is, was there any irregularity in the process? Was there any bribery and corruption in the process? And the IMS sub-theme of it, of that, is extremely relevant, both in the respect of the bigger picture, the complex theory, and of course, at the same time, because I was intimately involved in it, I am hopefully a relevant witness to testify about this. And my understanding is that other than me, there is no such other human being on this earth, at least not one who is actually prepared to withstand this kind of situation.
I want to move on now to a different topic. I want to ask you whether indeed you appreciate that South Africa underwent a complete sea change during the 90s as it transitioned from a non-democratic state to a democratic state.
Yes, I've played my small part in it.
And you understand that that sea change affected all aspects of the country's political and the country's military life as well.
Yes, I can understand that.
You appreciate that prior to becoming a democratic state, this country believed, or the government of this country believed, it was under significant military threat, and it was unable to procure armaments on the open market, and therefore it did what it could, either to evade sanctions or to grow a local arms-producing industry and the like.
Yes, I understand that.
And you understand that overnight, when that situation changed and South Africa was received back into the international world, that it now had opportunities, amongst other things, for the acquisitions of arms on a totally different basis than it had ever had before.
Well, of course, there are many meanings to that, but I certainly, if there was skullduggery in arms acquisition before 94, I would have certainly hoped that the new democratic dispensation would have ceased that after 94.
I'm just making the point that now South Africa could, on an international level, seek the supply of arms, that it would not be under sanctions, that there would be competition amongst countries to supply it with the armaments sought, and that the basis upon which arms could be procured had changed completely.
No, it's not completely. I mean, I think if one has sight or knowledge of the Defence Review, which came out which was started in 95 and ended in 97, there are still many aspects, specifically strategic ones, strategic capabilities, that hadn't changed completely. And
one of the fundamental changes was a new constitutional dispensation which placed the procurement of arms, and indeed the military, under civilian control.
Yes, that's correct.
And which fixed the government, the democratic government, and its organs of state with duties to oversee acquisition of arms by the military.
Yes, within the constitutional precepts of Section 217, certainly including transparency and cost effectiveness and competitiveness.
And in terms of chronology or history, this sea change occurred, was dated, happened at about the time, roughly, of the termination of phase 1 of Project Citron.
Yes, the Defence Review, I believe, started in 1995, which is Citron phase 1 was terminated in May 1995.
Yes, put it another way, Citron phase 1 had been conceived under the non-democratic government, and its continued lifespan came to an end because of the Defence Review.
That's correct, yes.
And you're not suggesting that there is something untoward in the government of this country having immediately put in place a Defence Review once the sea change had occurred?
Well, the sea change occurred at something like the 26th of April 1994. So we're talking about May 1995. They didn't put those changes in, once the sea changes occurred.
In that situation, I understand you to be complaining to the Commission that the results of Citron phase 1 were put aside, and you argue to this Commission as one of the grievances which you have and one of the matters which the Commission should now investigate, why those particular bidders who had been top of the pile at the end of Citron phase 1 should not automatically have been put on top of the pile after the Defence Review and when phase 2 came into effect. That's your grievance, isn't it?
Is it?
I want an answer, not a question.
I don't think that's my position at all. I can't ever remember saying, using your words, that my position is that the members, sorry, not the members, the bidders in phase 1, the top of the pile. Now, is the top of the pile, you talked about the plural, so we talked about that there was one bidder at the top of the pile, which was Bathan, but there were two bidders at the top. And are you trying to say to me that it's my position that they should automatically have gone to the top of the pile in phase 2? That certainly isn't my position.
Do you accept that in phase 2 there should have been a replay of the process?
Yes, indeed.
And that it would be fair that all those who had participated in phase 1 be given an opportunity to participate in phase 2.
Yes.
You accept, therefore, that it was proper that all 9, if there were indeed 9 countries involved in the previous bidding, should be invited to participate in the second round.
Yes.
And that would include Germany.
Yes.
So you have no complaint at all against the fact that bidding was reopened and that the Germans, amongst others, were invited to bid?
No, I don't have any complaint. In fact, I personally don't have any complaint at all. I'm just a messenger here in that respect. I'm a witness before a information gathering commission. But if it were to be a complaint, my only complaint was that there doesn't seem to have been a valid reason for why the phase 1 process had to be stopped on the so-called requirements of the defence review. The naval requirement existed. It existed from 1980. We know that requirement still is valid today. The Navy requires its offshore patrol capability of perennially. For just because there are changes of government doesn't mean to say the Navy's requirements change. So what I'm saying is that the Navy's requirements were valid. There was a due process in round 1, which clearly the Spanish won, and all the documents that I adduced to, the ones written by Admiral Howell, Chief of Staff Plans, and in fact his testimony before I reviewed the JRT, are that the process was completely done properly. What I'm saying is maybe two things. There doesn't seem to be a valid reason for putting that process on hold, unless it's a political one. And normally, defence decisions, defence equipment decisions, are not based on political requirements, they're based on defence requirements, naval requirements. So that's and if it's true, what this piece of rubbish, absurd German investigation report says, as you say, call it, if that process was halted, Citron round 1, because the chairperson of the Joint Standing Committee on Defence was paid a 2.5 million Deutschmark bribe in order to do that, then that is part of my bigger thesis. That's my, not complaint, that is my evidence. It's not a complaint. I'm not here as a complainant. I'm just here as a witness.
Well, let me respond to the answers you're giving by asking you some questions about them. If you then were the government instead of the government, you would have continued with phase 1. You would not have redone the bidding. Is that the first point?
Yes.
Well, you're not the government.
Thank you for that.
The next point is one where the chairman, some time ago, has put to you, with great respect, the relevant question. How would any sane person believe that Mr. Yenge, on his own, would have the ability to cause the defence review, to stop the project on his own, to bring the Germans back, to create a situation which you say is one that this commission should seriously go and investigate?
Well, I said it's a point that they should investigate. I think that there are probably far more serious ones regarding the bribery and corruption. But of course, if what the Germans say, that this also involved bribery and corruption, then that would be a relatively serious point for the Commission to consider. But the other part of your question is the chief whip of the ruling party, who is also the joint, the chairperson of both defence committees. There's a portfolio committee and the other one, the Joint Standing Committee on Defence and the portfolio committee. Also, as the evidence was that he was being groomed or lined up to be the next Minister of Defence. And we do know that Joe Medici retired not that much later. So obviously there was a successor coming, and I believe that it is eminently possible. I don't bear a burden of proof, thankfully, in this regard. I'm just bringing the evidence to the Commission that it was Mr. Yengeni's own testimony, recorded by the German party, not the German investigators. They did record it, but it was also pre-recorded by Mr. Winnings, who meant to have signed both that bribery agreement with Tony Yengeni and the subsequent one with Chippy Sheikh. So there seems to be a pattern here that it is eminently possible that he had the wherewithal to influence the people in government. Mr. Yengeni, to this day, despite a criminal conviction related to something involved in the arms deal, certainly not directly, is still a very important member of the National Executive Committee. He was far, far more important in 1995 than he is now. And my view is that he certainly had the capability of doing so. But anyway, it doesn't matter. He said he did. The Germans recorded that he said he did, and therefore were prepared to pay him 2.5 million Danish marks.
Just a couple of questions arising out of that, because I don't want to debate further your theories of what Mr. Yengeni's capabilities were. You're referring, I take it, to a German Teutonic memorandum, as you call it. Is that right?
Well, I only call one particular memorandum the Teutonic memorandum because, and it's not meant in jest, it's just juxtaposing it with the French equivalent, which is well known now as the French encrypted fax. But the Teutonic memorandum had nothing to do with Tony Yengeni.
So which is the document from Mr. Yengeni that you're referring to?
It's just the German investigating report.
You have said document of Mr. Yengeni. You don't say what someone said Mr. Yengeni said. You put it to the Commission. There is a confession, as it were, by Mr. Yengeni. I'm asking you to show us where that is.
You see, you actually are wrong. I didn't say that at all. What I said is the document, being the German investigation report, reports that Mr. Christoph Hunnings had documented himself that Tony Yengeni claimed that he was responsible for getting the Germans back into the game by means of the defence review. That's what I said. I didn't say that there was a document signed or written by Mr. Yengeni in this regard. I've never adduced such a document. So I'm afraid you're wrong when you say that that's what I said. What I've just repeated is what I said.
And the next question I have is, what right have you to describe the Germanic documentation as it were, official German investigative reporting, when you know you have not had the authority of the German prosecution to use the document? You've taken the document in a way in which they have no knowledge that you acquired it, and you know perfectly well how rudimentary and preparatory it is, and how wrong it is of you to ascribe this as if it were final, determinative German investigation.
Well, again, you see, you're wrong. I've never described it as that. I've described it as in fact, a number of times I've described it as a series of 3 investigative reports done by mandated people, being the German criminal investigating department in Düsseldorf, their reports seem to be official reports. I've never, ever once said that they are final. So I'm afraid trying to put words in my mouth like that is actually, it's incorrect to do so. What I have said is, this is what exists. And the other thing is, this very issue was ventilated by yourself right at the very, very beginning on day 2 of my testimony, and you indicated that you would be challenging the admissibility of it, and the Commission, the chairpersons made a ruling that it was going to be admissible, and I only addressed it after that. And everybody knew full well, the chairman himself acknowledged having it, so he must have been aware of what I was going, or at least some idea of how, or of what I was going to address. Maybe not. He may not have thought that I would address every single one of the 40 pages, which was what the issue was regarding that ruling. But if a ruling had been made that this document is so rubbish, so absurd, so unacceptable, so non-final, so whatever, then I wouldn't have used the document in my evidence.
What? I'm sorry, I'm not quite certain when Dr. Young gets this view that I ever said that this document is going to be admissible. There's no such a ruling, as far as I can. Unless if some of those councils who were present can remind me at what stage they make a ruling about the so-called German investigative reports. I'm not aware of such a ruling.
Sorry, sir. I didn't say that there was such a ruling. I said there were, based on that objection from Mr. Cooper, you made a different ruling. What I'm saying is that no ruling that the documents were admissible was made. It's not that there was a ruling, is that there wasn't a ruling. What the more important is that the issue was ventilated. And my memory is not perfect, but I think there may have been a statement from Mr. Cooper that may well later, or in argument, may argue for the admissibility, and I think that was, so yes, you can argue with it later. But certainly, I'm only working from memory, but certainly it was not ruled inadmissible at that stage. That is my point.
If we may proceed, what you have done is you've reminded me that I had referred to, but not read out, the responses of the Public Prosecutor's Office of Bochum. And I just want to do that very quickly before we move on. If you'll turn to volume 4 of the cross-examination file at page 745, in the letter written to the lawyers for Mr. James Gessie, the prosecutor, under his further reasons, had said in the second paragraph, as regards the background assumed by the author of the memo, filed as folio 7 in sec of the files, bribery of foreign officials, it is to be noted that no specific or substantial evidence whatsoever exists that would corroborate this assumption. Neither the, quote, experience gained in criminalistic practice, nor, quote, unconfirmed press reports are suited as sufficient evidence of a criminal offence within the meaning of the Strafprocess Ordinance. The documents and deeds found in Ferrostal AG offices do not permit the inference as to the funds paid to Malar having been forwarded to foreign officials within the meaning of that German statute. And then, of course, this paragraph, not only is it impermissible, it is in fact wrongful to use a perpetrated case of tax evasion, which has in fact not been perpetrated, as a pretext for excessive investigation pursued with the intent of proving assumed malfeasance with a view to the presumed criminal offence of bribery. So, Dr. Young, it doesn't seem as if I'm entirely alone in my categorisations to which you refer.
I'm sure I'm allowed to make a response, or whether you're just making a statement.
Is there anything you want to say?
Absolutely. First of all, you just read this out. This document is in context of Ferriston. It doesn't come from the public prosecutor's office in Düsseldorf, which was responsible for the Thyssen investigations. This has got nothing to do with the Thyssen investigation. It's Ferriston. It says so. If you look at the details of it, it talks about the amounts of money in respect of Mallow as being still on Ferriston's books. That's quite a different case to the Thyssen case, where the money had been paid to Tony Georgiadis and also to Mallow. Okay. The fact that that it is in respect of not only Buchan but Mr. Gessin has got nothing whatsoever with one single one that I referred to when I was traversing the 3 German reports. Secondly, the letter itself is standalone. Whatever has been provided to me here, as I have an English translation which seems to come from something else in German. In fact, it's written by, the German one is written by hand. But anyway, I don't think that there's anything in this Gessin letter that is directly relevant whatsoever in the smallest minuscule iota that relates to the Thyssen case.
And when you went to the public prosecutor of Düsseldorf, was the public prosecutor of Düsseldorf prepared to stand behind anything that you were asking him to do, or make any representations in regard to foreign bribery?
No, he only referred me to the public prosecutor in Düsseldorf, not to Buchan.
And I'm talking about the public prosecutor in Düsseldorf. What did he do when you approached him?
He basically said that they are only allowed to interact and correspond with official investigators.
But he also said to you, these preliminary proceedings to which you refer in your email were closed by the 13th of June 2008.
Yes, I acknowledged right from the beginning that I knew that the German investigations were indeed closed in 2008, the latter half of 2008, and my understanding from those German reports, as well as the more official letter request, the MLA, is in respect of the statute of limitations coming in Germany as regards the prosecution in Germany of German persons, and also, of course, the most important thing which you read out yourself is these reports were clearly intended for South African recipients, and it was their hope understanding is that this commission inquiry is one of those processes.
Yes, I'm sure you can rest assured that this commission will in due course weigh up what you've said, will look at the documents and will make an assessment.
Yes, I also may say, like I said, we know for a fact, because I've testified that and it doesn't seem to have been challenged, is that at least one of these reports was in the hands of currently unemployed. And he only met me to discuss this issue in the latter half of 2009. I think it was in the third quarter of 2009, if my memory serves me correctly. And he specifically asked me to be the formal complainant. How can it be that they can be asking me to be the official complainant in the third quarter of 2009 when what they were working on, and being specific here, what they were working is what he showed me, just that one page or so regarding the chippy-shaped bribe and the relevant bribes. Why would he have showed that to me in 2009 if this total investigation was completely irrelevant and being closed with a finding that every single allegation or suspicion had been found not to be true? There is no logic in that. It's called dint of logic in legal speak. I am a South African and I'm testifying before a South African Commission of Inquiry. I'm testifying in respect of what I knew in this particular leg, the theme, which came to my knowledge in 2009 and endured until the investigations were closed down inexplicably, in my view at least, I think in September 2010. So all of my logic stands good for at least bringing this to the attention of this commission.
Have you finished everything you want to say?
Maybe not everything, but for the moment I've said what I want to say on that particular point.
I want to proceed to a short, in fact a number of short topics, if I can optimistically use that description in regard to your cross-examination. And what I want to discuss very briefly with you is this technical question of the fibre distributive data interface, the FDDI, which we've come across from time to time in your statement and in your evidence. I just want to fit it into a context. I understand you to have told the Commission that the standard to be used, the basis of the technology that you have been instructed to use for the purpose of Project Diodon was this FDDI. Is that right?
Yes, well that was the second part. The first part was to use fibre optics, and based on that critical decision, it made logical sense therefore also to use FDDI.
So,
well, not only Project Diodon, that particular letter written by Pierre Meiring to the Chief of the Navy for the attention of Captain Commerman was for Project Diodon and all future surface naval vessels in the SA Navy.
forever?
No, until they wrote the next letter, overturning it with the next. You don't just write, the next. All these things are preceded by formal things called trade-off studies, until the technology became obsolete or superseded by something better, and a trade-off study was done. Then that would stand until the next instruction.
Was there ever an instruction that FDDI was to be utilised in Project Citron?
I don't think there might have been a self-standing letter of the same type, but as we looked at the pretty diagrams this morning on pages, we were from 750 and 748, the one that I elected to use actually says FDDI database. So certainly in the baseline documents, the contractual baseline documents, the reference to FDDI is very clearly there. It is also more emphatic in terms of the specification, which uses what I think we call the imperative form, is thou shalt, and it said SafeNet, the SafeNet standard shall be used, SafeNet 2 standard shall be used. In fact, it actually refers to the number of that standard, because there are two more standard 2204A, which is the survivable adaptable fiber embedded network, and that is based fundamentally on the FDDI technology. So every single imperative coming out of the baseline at that stage certainly would indicate or prescribe the use of FDDI.
All I was asking was whether you could point to anything or to a single document saying that FDDI had to be utilised in Project Citron.
And the answer is yes, I can.
And that is by reference to the baseline which you mentioned.
Yes, for specific documents in the baseline, there is the user requirement specification, and the platform requirement specification. Is what I can remember, but there's certainly certainly two or more instances of that.
Now the alternative, as I understand it, one of the alternatives is the Ethernet alternative. Is that right?
Yes, it is an alternative, and that was the basis of the Detexis database.
And I understand the Ethernet is in fact in use in the NATO navies. Is that right?
Yes, it is, but let's not be confused. Technically speaking, and I think I'm getting more into my solid ground now. Ethernet consists of many different flavors. The current Ethernet that is used, in fact, we even sell our Ethernet boards, very similar to FDDI boards as well, to maybe not the US Navy, because they're still using our FDDI boards, but Korean Navy and Italian Navy and others, Japanese Navy, and that is gigabit Ethernet. That is quite different of what was originally identified for the Detexis database. In fact, the very original one was 10 megabits per second. So I'm getting slightly technical here, but in terms of the original standard, a decade or more down the track from FDDI, still used in the US Navy, are still selling these FDDI boards every single month of the year to the US Navy. But in any case, that was not, the gigabit Ethernet is not the basis of the Detexis database as far as I know. It wasn't then.
As I understand it, and as I say, I want to be very brief about all of this, the FDDI technology, call it your bespoke technology, is not being developed anymore. It's not being used, except in vessels that were built earlier and were built with the FDDI, and where it would cost just too much to convert to Ethernet. And that's given you a very nice market in the supply of the older US Navy ships with FDDI. That's the position, isn't it?
it's not, you see talking from a position of ignorance, and you're just making that as a throwaway statement. I'm involved in this stuff. That's my bread and butter, other than preparing statements for commissions of inquiry. Sure, the FTDI technology is no longer used for the newest designs, but that doesn't mean to say it's not used for brand new ships. In fact, I have current orders now with Raytheon in Arizona and in the Naval Surface Warfare Center in I think it's certainly in California, for new ships. The newest class of warship in the United States Navy is called the San Antonio class amphibious assault vessel. And I think they're building 20 of these vessels. They've built half a dozen so far. And whenever they build a new, they build one every couple of years. We get orders for brand new vessels. And I can tell you that even though this technology is end of life, let's say it's not really end of life because that means it would be dead. But it's not dead, it's just that you don't put it into new designs. But most of the non-Aegis class, hopefully your own witness will be able to tell you what this is, non-Aegis class surface combat vessels of the US Navy, including its aircraft carriers, maybe not the very latest one, the George H. Bush, but previous ones, San Antonio class, but its equivalent to the combat suite is called the SSDS Mark II OA, that stands for Ship Self-Defense Systems Mark II, open architecture, use our FTDI technology to this very day. So does various elements of the Japanese Navy and maritime defense forces.
Thank you, Dr. Young. I think we're able to understand that, notwithstanding the crass ignorance of the questions, the modern technology in the modern designs is indeed Ethernet or Ethernet derivative. But it's a little consequence. Let us proceed to something that is more relevant. I want to ask you questions about the IPMS simulator.
Okay.
The IPMS simulator on board performs monitoring and control of the ship's machinery, the damage control systems. And the IPMS simulator is the shore-based training simulator on which the ship's machinery crew can be trained to operate the onboard IPMS. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And it's your contention that C²I² was selected as the supplier for the shore-based training simulator, and it was then deselected at a late stage. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And one of the attacks you make on Admiral Cummerman is that he falsely denied that C²I² had been selected, and he had the temerity to state that C²I² had only been listed as a potential supplier. Is that right?
Yes, I can remember, what I can remember is he actually stated, I don't think it was before this commission, but before the BACWA, is that the state had never selected C²I² in any way to supply the IPMS simulator.
And I understand you went further before the JIT hearings with a theory that the deselection had occurred to punish you for crying foul in regard to other parts of the Corvette contract. Was that your contention before the JIT?
It was, yes, at that time.
Is it still your accusation?
No, I've approached this theme from a different angle, and that was that we were actually selected, and inexplicably we were then deselected.
But you no longer contend that that was the result of some kind of improper conspiracy between the state and the main contractor to punish you?
I'm not contending before this commission that, no.
Bear with me, Chairman, I'm just looking for a letter. I want you to go to your own files of documents that were put in with your statement and your evidence to file 1. And I'm going to refer to RNY 10. Which will be found at page 131.
I know we're on a theme here, but I just want to remind that it's now 3:45, and I would like a body break sooner rather than later.
Maybe we will find out from Advocate Cooper.
I'm in your hands entirely, Mr. Bishop.
No, the point that I want to find out from you, how long do you think will take with these witnesses?
Overall, I will be busy with this witness, I think, for the rest of the day and for some part of tomorrow. I had hoped to finish today, but it's not proved possible. But if we were to sit the usual hours that we have been sitting, Chairman, then I'm quite certain we will be able to finish comfortably during the course of the earlier part of tomorrow.
Maybe there's a adjourn for 15 minutes, and I suggest that we all proceed until 6 o'clock.
May I just say, I have got an appointment not far away at 6 this evening. I just need time to back up my computer, but if we could make it 5:45 or 5:50, that would help me.
Or maybe 5 to 6.
Okay, I don't want to have an accident on the way, because otherwise I won't be here tomorrow.
Okay, let's adjourn for 15 minutes.
Nó think I mixed them up.
I think it could be
For me now. You are. This place is so.
you complain. Hot dog, hot cheese, hot dog. Stomach out. Why? Wala lang. Anong ganda po ito?
Right? You didn't help. This might be the way back.
So banana office.
Evolution was my son.
Ah, okay. That's mine.
Anh ấy cái trace là cái mà anh ấy cái
Wow, pun tak kilo sana. Kamu dua.
in between. Victoria. Victoria.
Lutz.
Victoria.
Ang siya Lutz wala. Oh, she has a problem. She has a problem. Ang was keep her